Podcast. My name is Jon Patton. As per usual, we've got another amazing guest. I know, I keep saying it, I keep beating that drum, but I actually mean it every damn time. We've got so many amazing guests coming on the show, and this week's guest is no different. But first, I got to tell you about the sponsor, Camerado. It's CAMORADO.com/TGC. My buddy Sean from the Firearms Radio Network created one of the coolest camo patterns out there. We've been tossing around ideas, Sean and I, about what to call it, right? And one of the terms that I kind of like is calling it the EDC, the everyday camo. There is a pattern out there for you. He's got a whole bunch, and the TGC signature pattern is called Sea Smoke. It's very blue. It's awesome. It looks great. Head over to camerado.com/TGC. Get yourself a item, a t-shirt, a hoodie, some pants, whatever, in Sea Smoke, and check it out. Thank you for supporting Camerado. Now, today's guest is a man that has a very, very interesting story. His name is Rob Young. Rob, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
I'm so effing excited that we can do this. We met at Goals really recently, that event. And what exactly were you doing there?
So I was on a couple of panels there at Goals. I was on a law enforcement panel. I have almost 20 years in law enforcement.
Okay.
But I was on an active shooter panel with some amazing folks. I happen to have survived one of the very first mass school shootings as a child.
Okay.
And we can
what? Okay, like I read that about you. We have to sort of we have to peel that onion. Yeah. When did this happen?
So really my story begins January 17th, 1989. I was a first grader at Cleveland Elementary School in Stockton, California. And, I want to paint the picture and kind of lay the foundation because we heard about it yesterday, active shooter, right? When we hear that term, everybody knows what we're talking about. But in 1989, that term hadn't been coined yet because school shootings, there had been recorded attacks on school-age children back to the 1700s. It was nothing new, but it was the first of its kind as far as the numbers. Most shootings that had happened were student on student. This was an adult male. I don't say his name unless I have to. Because it doesn't matter. It was an adult armed with an AK-47.
Oh my God.
He walked onto our campus that morning while we played at recess. I was in first grade at the time, by the way.
So you're in first grade, you're at recess, and this dude comes in. Tell me what you're comfortable telling me, man. I'm sure this brings up a whole bunch of trauma.
Yeah, but I'm used to telling it. So he walked up this the back of the school, there was no locking gate. It was just a pole attached to a cyclone fence, and it was the same gate that I walked through that morning when my mom dropped me off. And he ended up parking his car right outside the gate. He lit it on fire with a Molotov cocktail, and he walked onto our campus again armed with an AK-47 and a 9mm Taurus pistol. He walks by a row of portable classrooms, kind of takes a peek into one of the classrooms. Luckily, the teacher had seen him coming, and she had a classroom full of deaf kids, by the way. And she signs to the kids, "Hey, hide in the corner, danger." And these kids hid. He walks up to the glass window in the door, lights are off, and doesn't look like anybody's home, bypasses the classroom. And unfortunately, there was a couple hundred of us on the playground. He took a kneeling stance, opened fire with his AK, just at random, and he ended up shooting 29 kids that day, killed 5, and then put a pistol in his mouth and ended his life as the police officers got.
My God. What was the timeline of this transpiring?
About 3 minutes.
So dude just shows up, and within 3 minutes he shoots 29 kids and offs himself.
Yeah.
Before the cops can off him. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that our school at the time, the neighborhood that it was located in Stockton, we had about 70% Southeast Asian student community. And
Okay.
there was a lot of immigrant families from Cambodia, from Khmer Rouge. I mean, think about that, because, early 80s, late 70s, people are still escaping the killing fields of Cambodia and Vietnam. And, they came to Stockton as a safe haven, and a lot of their kids were at our school. And we'll never know why the gunman did what he did. I mean, he had stuff written on the side of his rifle, Hezbollah, he put Hell Satin because he couldn't spell. But apparently he had been going around to bars and places in the community days before, telling everybody that he was going to be famous. And he's definitely infamous, after this. And it's crazy that it's been 36 years and I still remember it like it was yesterday. I mean, it's something you just don't forget, and I don't know how much detail you want me to go into what I remember, but
dude, you can tell the story, man. Let's hear it.
That morning, what I remember was wanting to get on recess. And in fact, I'll even rewind. My mom was working for a nearby medical center, and we lived about 6 blocks from the school. And I remember, walking, it was kind of foggy. It was a January morning. We have a lot of waterways out in Stockton, so the fog is super thick sometimes. And I remember her telling me, she calls me Robbie. She says, Robbie, I just have a bad feeling about today. I don't want to send you to school. Didn't really have a reason why. She couldn't.
That's interesting.
A mother's intuition, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, like, the only thing I could think about as a first grader was getting to school, playing with my friends, playing kickball that morning. That's what I had planned. And I told my mom,
I can imagine you didn't have plans to do your taxes or something.
Yeah. And I remember getting to class, and I remember getting out on recess. And, I really wasn't up until that point. I hadn't had much experience with firearms. I didn't grow up in a household full of guns. Later on, yes, as a teenager. But, up until that point, I really had no experience. And I remember being out on recess and hearing the gunshots. And I wasn't so afraid. I just knew that everybody was running and screaming, and mama didn't raise a fool. And I took off towards my classroom. It's funny now that I speak at conferences, and I do a lot of consulting, and so I see a lot of numbers. And there's a statistic out there that says 85% of the untrained person will run towards a familiar entrance or exit when what hits the fan, right?
Oh yeah.
And I had about 100-yard sprint to my classroom that was in direct line of sight of the gunman, where he was kneeling and shooting. He was basically shooting towards my classroom. It had an outward swinging door that faced the playground. And I didn't run to my classroom. I actually ran towards a handball wall, and there were some tetherball poles around the handball wall. And when I say this handball wall, it was just like a wooden wall, like a plywood wall, probably 10 feet. And we talk about cover and concealment. This was really concealment. It wasn't cover, especially with an AK.
Right. Yeah.
But I remember running towards this handball wall to hide behind it. And at the last minute, I turned to see where my friend Scotty was. He was my best friend at the time. And when I turned, there was 4 girls and a boy that were killed that day. The boy was maybe 12 feet from me, and I watched him go down. Still not comprehending that a shooting was taking place. It wasn't, the gears just weren't going. It was just chaos, and terror. And
do you remember what it sounded like?
It was just a loud, just a low. I mean, everybody that knows about guns, and I could typically tell an AR versus an AK. AKs just have a distinct kind of a lower rumble, and that's what I was hearing. And everybody was screaming. I mean, it was super loud. But as I turned, my feet got swept above my head, and what had happened was a round went through my right foot. Across the ground, and it went through my foot, and my feet kind of went up, up in the air, and I hit the ground. And when I was on the ground, I felt a slap against my chest, and that was another round hitting the pavement in front of me and breaking apart. And I still have that bullet in my chest to this day. It broke apart a little bit, but I felt the slap against it. Again, not registering that I had just been shot. So I remember getting up and my foot was super heavy and I braced myself on that wooden handball wall. And I remember wood just exploding over my head. Rounds were coming through. And I looked up towards my classroom. I still had about 50 or 60 yards to go. And we had a substitute teacher that morning. And she's standing in our doorway as bullets are flying across the playground. And she's waving kids into the classroom. And they're just bombing into the classroom. And that's where I went. And I remember kind of hobbling a little bit. I don't remember being in much pain.
Sure.
It's in my classroom.
Your adrenaline's probably just pumping.
It's just, yeah, absolutely. And, you know, the tunnel vision, everything was real. I understand it now. But I remember getting into my classroom. And again, you know, like I mentioned before, the term active shooter wasn't a thing. So there was no training for anybody. And I remember the substitute teacher just telling us to get under our desks.
Okay.
And I did. I got under my desk and I remember sunlight coming through the wall, you know, from the bullet holes. I remember the sounds of the bullets hitting our metal desks and drywall dust kind of floating through the air. And I just put my hands over my head and just waited. That's all I can do. And then, you know, a couple minutes goes by and we hear the last shot. And sirens and everything else. And the last shot was the gunman putting a pistol in his mouth and ending his life.
That I remember is really, really intense. I cannot imagine what that's like. And the same remains today. I just don't know what it's like to be I can't know what it's like to be a child again and hear those sounds in a place that you would think would be safe.
Yeah, I mean, and again, the fear hadn't really set in. I mean, obviously it was terrifying. I'm looking down and I'll be honest, you know, I came from a pretty poor family and we didn't have a whole lot of money, but I'd gotten some new clothes for Christmas just a few weeks prior. And I was wearing LA Gears. If you remember the LA
Hell
Gears.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
So I had a brand new pair of LA Gears on and I looked down and there's a bullet hole on either side of my shoe and there's blood coming out. And I remember being pissed off because my shoe was ruined. I thought I was going to get in trouble. And I looked down at my chest and I saw the blood coming out of my chest. And again, it pissed me off because my aunt had just given me that sweater for Christmas. And I look over and I see my friend Scotty, the kid that I turned around looking for. And he's like pulling himself over towards me. And if I remember correctly, he was wearing like some shorts and he pulls up his shorts. And I said, you know, Scotty, look at my foot. And he said, Robbie, look at my leg. And he pulled up his pant leg and he had a hole, like an entrance wound that was, you know, normal size. And then probably like a golf ball size exit wound in his thigh.
Oh my gosh.
And we're in there. We're like, you know, 6 years old. And he looked at me and it was at that moment that it started registering. He goes, Robbie, I think we've been shot.
So he verbalized that to you.
Yeah. And that's when the fear really started setting in. And, you know, I wasn't scared of death per se. I was scared of dying and my parents not being there.
Mm.
And, you know, because the only thing I knew of people that got shot was what I had seen on television. You know, people get shot on TV or in the movies and they die, you know, and that's the only thing that I knew. And I thought that's what was going to happen. I remember thinking, like, this isn't right. Like, this shouldn't have happened. This was a school. It shouldn't have happened. We're supposed to be safe here. And I remember the paramedics coming in and doing what paramedics do. And they come in and they immediately start cutting off our clothes and
oh my God, yeah,
poking us with, you know, IVs and morphine. And I remember biting the paramedic, you know, his hand, and he stood up and you know, because I'm thinking, like, if he stops working on me, then maybe this all goes away.
So your adolescent mind is just in full on panic protection mode. And you're like, no, don't do this. That way I stay alive. Is that right? Accurate?
Yeah. It was kind of like, it was my way of trying to hit the pause button. Like, going, wait a second, you know, I'm not ready for this.
Whoa.
Never forget the words that he said. And I carry this with me to this day. And he said, young man, the fact that you're feeling pain is a good thing. It means you're alive. And he goes, you're going to be okay. He goes, I'm going to get you through this. And I'm going to get you back to mom and dad. And I was like, okay, and I had, my kindergarten teacher from the year prior. She's standing there, she's holding my face, and she's telling me, Robbie, you need to let them help you. And I did. I calmed down and let him do what he needed to do. And he gave me some feel good medicine. And and I remember getting taken out onto the front yard of the school, and there's just, the people were messed up, man. And there was, like I said, there was over 29 kids that were shot, and there was other injuries and stuff going on, people getting trampled and people having panic attacks. It's just chaos. And it seemed like every law enforcement agency and EMS from the county were there. There were helicopters buzzing above. And I remember being taken to the hospital, and they had to take me to the next town over because all the ERs were full.
Oh yeah. And that many kids all at once, every one of those has to go to some kind of triage.
Yeah. And they still have to run already busy ERs.
Right. Yeah.
Where crime doesn't happen, I guess.
So at the time, was Stockton like nearly as populated as it is now? Like what kind of, is this like a city? I don't know the area.
Yeah, very urban. So Stockton's located about an hour south of Sacramento, which is the state capital. Very urban, a lot of poverty, a lot of gangs, a lot of crime. It's a medium-sized city, but it has, if you look right now, it's on the top 10 most dangerous places to live just because of the crime and everything else.
So you're in the hood and you're at school. Dude comes in and starts blasting. You get shot twice.
Yeah.
Your buddy gets a hole in his leg. You're 6 years old and you're trying to absorb this information. What is going through your head when you're laying there seeing all this shit like flying overhead and all these adults? Like, what is going through your head? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was loud. And what I described now, and again, I remember it like it was yesterday. It was so loud, but it was eerily quiet at the same time. Your body does weird things when it's in that flight or fight realm, and I was really in that flight. I wasn't really in a fight mode. I was just in a flight, get away from it. And so, learning about physiological, what your body does in situations like that. I understand it. Again, I understand it now. I didn't really understand it then. And I remember looking over and seeing, one of my classmates, a female classmate, just screaming at the top of her lungs, but I don't remember what it sounded like. It was just one of the,
seeing it.
Yeah. And I remember the smell, man, just the blood, the smell of iron and just that metallic smell. That's something, and they talk about PTSD and all that stuff. I have, call it what you will. It is what it is, but that's really like what I relive every time I tell the stories. I just remember the smell and almost where you can taste it, and the smell of the drywall floating through the air and the rounds hitting the metal desks. I hear that so loud in my head even now as I tell the story. But the fear, it wasn't until it clicked what was going on, because again, it wasn't processing until I was told that, hey, I think we've been shot, that I had been shot. It just didn't make sense to me. It's like it didn't compute, It's like,
sure, you have no idea what's going on because to that point you'd not been exposed to anything like that, correct?
Right. And so I remember getting loaded up in the ambulance and being taken to the hospital and getting there. And my mom, remember I said she worked at a medical center nearby. Close, actually she walked to work after dropping me off because we only had one car at the time. And my mom, she tells the story now that she was in one of the nursing stations. She had just got done wheeling a patient back to the hospital room. And somebody asked her, hey, did you hear about what happened at the school, Cleveland? And she thought she said in Cleveland. And she said, no, what's up? She said, yeah, the school down the street. And this gal, not realizing that my mom had a son that went to that school. She said, gosh. They're being brought into the ER right now. It's all hands on deck. We're going to need you to go down there. And my mom's like, wait a second, my son goes there, and she starts freaking out and she turns around and her boss comes down the elevator and says, hey, Brenda, we have a phone call for you. And what it was a nurse at Lodi Memorial where they took me, saying, hey, we need you to come. Your son's been injured. And my mom's like, is he okay? Is he alive? And the lady goes, I can't tell you that over the phone. You just need to get here. And my mom said, you're going to tell me if my son's alive or not. And she said, all I can tell you, Mrs. Young, is that your son is alert and he's asking for you. And my mom's like, I'll be right there. And her boss,
on the way.
Yeah, she gets there. And I was in the hospital. I was lucky, man. I was in the hospital 3.5 days. The round that went through my foot, they said if I was an adult, I would have probably lost my foot.
Oh,
but
wow.
Because I was such a young kid and so small, your bones are a lot softer and pliable. And if this was my foot, the bullet entered here and came out the other side, it didn't hit a bone. They think the energy that was expended kind of pushed my bones up, and the bullet was able to travel clean through without hitting a bone. The round that lodged itself in my chest, it missed all the major arteries, and it narrowly missed my heart.
So you just have a bullet in your chest. Do you ever feel it anymore?
No, it comes up in X-rays.
Okay.
No, it's dissolved some, and it's calcified. It's been 36 years,
right?
And it's,
yeah.
But I don't even really have a scar on my chest. There's a little, if you stretch the skin a little bit, you could see a little white mark, but it's moved around so much. You could definitely see the scar on my foot, definitely the exit wound, and you can even still see the entrance wound. But I healed pretty well, man. Physically, I was doing okay. I was on crutches. Right. My dad thought, he was scared that I was going to be some messed up, mental case after. And he said, I knew you were going to be okay when I look outside and you're playing with your friends and you're on your crutches and you're using one of your crutches as a machine gun, And so he's like, all right, you're going to be all right. And and so that shooting really, it sparked California's first assault weapon bans.
Okay.
Ruse, if you've heard that term, it's still talked about in legislative hearings to this day. In fact, in 2011? It was 2011. I worked with GOA in Washington, D.C., Gun Owners of America, and introduced a pro-gun bill with Eric Pratt and his dad. That would have allowed school district officials to be able to carry a CCW while they're working. Unfortunately, the bill failed. A lot of people did what they do now, and they blamed the gun after that incident, and they wanted to ban firearms, and they did through Ruse. They banned over 50 makes and models of so-called assault weapons, and I was just never one of those who blamed the gun, even as a kid. I realized that this was the decision of a madman and an evil person. And I knew even back then as a little kid, I understood that evil is evil and evil is always going to exist. And, as I grew up, I got into law enforcement in early 2004.
Okay. Wow. Talk about going full circle.
Yeah. And I got into law enforcement. I actually went to work for the school district police department in Stockton. Started my career there. Yeah, it was, so they have a 24/7 police department that works 7 days a week, 24/7, full authority, but they're owned and operated by the school district. And in California, school districts, transit districts, a lot of special districts can have their own police departments. And so Stockton Unified had started their own PD and hired me when I was 21 years old. And I swore in and ended up patrolling the same district that Cleveland School was a part of. And then in 2007, I went from being a single guy to I was married and had a couple kids, and I needed something else. And I decided to start looking at the Bay Area, which is about 2 hours from where I live, and decided to commute to Union City. I ended up becoming a city cop in the Bay Area. A lot more money, a lot more opportunity for me as a police officer. And, I always paid attention to the active shooter trainings and stuff that we had to do as police officers, as first responders, because of my story. And
sure.
I'm thankful for that training because it ended up saving my life in 2013. And you talk about full circle.
Hold on. So you somewhere along the line decide that you want to be in law enforcement. what made you decide to go that direction? Was it actually, hey, I was in this shooting and I want to try and help people, or was there some like, crap, I don't know what to do, I guess I'll do this? Like, how did
No,
that come up?
I mean, I'm a God-fearing man. I have faith. I don't prescribe to being religious, but I believe that God has a calling on everybody's life. And
Okay.
my dad used to say that he remembers being, me being 3 years old, even before the shooting, saying, "Daddy, I want to be a cop."
Okay.
I didn't come from a family of law enforcement. In fact, I came from the exact opposite. I kind of fell far from the tree. It's not like I went into the family business, but I just always had that drive and that desire to become a police officer, and it never shook. And people ask, did the shooting, did that spark something in you? And it definitely supported it. It definitely helped strengthen that desire. But honestly, even before the shooting, it's just something that I knew I was going to do. And
Wow.
so at 20 years old, I was able to enroll into the police academy in Stockton. I put myself through. And at the time, there was a hiring freeze with a lot of agencies. A lot of departments weren't picking a lot of people up, but I had an opportunity to get in, and I actually got the last seat in that class that year. So I started in late 2002 and graduated in September of 2003, which was right when I turned 21. You have to be 21 years old to become a police officer here in California. And so I jumped all over it and became a cop. And like I said, I started my career with the school district police. I thought, what better way to give back?
Right. Yeah.
Always had a desire to protect schools. And even when I transferred to Union City, I always, again, not only paid attention to the active shooter stuff, but I paid attention to the campuses and the schools, and worked a lot of different assignments for Union City. But one of the most rewarding assignments was working as a school resource officer for that department. And, you mentioned full circle, and I'll get back to 2013. So August 13, I went to work, and I was trying to get the day off because I wanted to attend my buddy's bachelor party that day. Couldn't get the day off, staffing, and my sergeant was like, "Hey, if you come in and work a half day, I'll let you go at a certain time. That way you can get on the road and get to your event." And I was like, "All right, cool." But for my fellow first responders out there, they'll tell you it's the days that you have something planned that you're not going to get off on time. And that day I responded to I was a man with a gun that came out as a person armed with a long gun who was walking through a neighborhood shooting at passing motorists and people walking their dogs. People were hiding behind trees, the whole bit. And I happened to be about 3 blocks away.
That just sounds like a Chicago on a Tuesday.
Yeah, it pretty much was.
That's wild. So you're trying to get through the day and get this crazy call. Guy is shooting up, a neighborhood randomly, shooting at cars, etc. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and I can hear the gunshots going off. And I was sitting there waiting for a tow truck. I was recovering a unoccupied stolen vehicle, and I'm sitting there talking to my beat partner who's a former Marine, and we're talking about his Marine Corps days. And all of a sudden we start hearing these gunshots before the call comes out, and we looked at each other like, yeah, that's close. And we can hear, bam, 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 bam. And I'm like, all right. And then the tone alert went off on the radio. And when the tone alert goes off, you listen because you're like, oh, that's not good. And they dispatched us, 3 blocks from my location and said, hey, we're getting these reports. And I remember driving there going, this is crazy. Like, this is, I survived what I was thinking about Cleveland School. I was like, I survived what I did as a kid, and there's no way I'm not getting home tonight, and I remember getting around the corner and getting about, a block and a half of where I needed to be. And I unlocked my rifle and I rack around and I put it muzzle down in the passenger floorboard of my patrol car. And then I thought, I can hear the gunshots, but I don't see the gunman.
Oh, that's scary.
I can see people hiding. I can see people crouching behind trees and behind parked cars, and they're pointing. And I was like, I need to get out on foot. So I did. And I grabbed my rifle and I get out, and I'm coming up on this little cross street, Canita. And I I see a patrol unit coming my way in a patrol car, and he makes the left, and it was one of our corporals, and he puts out on the radio, he said, "Hey, I got eyes on the gunman." So I knew that the guy was around the corner and to the right. And so I sprinted on foot for about a block, and I get around the corner, and the corporal had this guy at gunpoint. The guy's standing on the street corner, and again, it came out as a guy with a long gun, but he ended up having a machete and a 45. And I think people saw the machete, heard the gunshots, and put it out as a long gun.
Sure.
And I remember running, and I seen the 45 shell casings in the middle of the road, and it looked like artillery, you know. I was like, this is... And I ended up crouching behind a patrol car with the corporal, and I took a kneeling stance and had the guy in my sights. We had EOTechs. I knew I had him dead to right, and we're giving him commands, and we're giving him an opportunity to drop the gun. And I just remember thinking, like, this is just insane, you know. And I had a feeling we were going to end up shooting this guy because just his demeanor, he wasn't giving up, and he's taunting us, and he's, you know, telling us to come on and kill him. And then we get about 7 units on scene pretty quick, actually. And I remember telling the corporal, I said, "Hey, I'm going to take the shot because he's not dropping the gun." And the corporal's like, "Hey, Rob has the shot." And as soon as he said that, the guy's like, "F you," and he raised the gun up, and
bang,
we lit him up. So
yeah, you have to.
I hit him 6 times with my 5.56, and I remember him going down. He had a lot of fight in him. He dropped the gun, dropped the machete, but he's still rolling around, and felt like we were there forever, man. You know, and I told everybody stay put, and I said, "Don't move." I said, "The gun's still next to him. We're giving him commands." And I told my partner who was with me on the call before, I said, "You got him?" And he's like, "Yeah, I got him." He goes, "I got a headshot." I said, "Hey, if he moves for that gun, you take the shot." And he did. Yeah. The guy, and I said, "Hey, take the shot." And my partner put one in his head and ended that real quick. And so, you know,
the thing that comes to my mind is, you know, this sort of retribution. Do you feel like that guy represented the elementary school shooter for you? Did you draw a correlation there, or were you just doing your job, you know, saving the people in that area? Was there something inside you that said, you know, this is the guy all over again?
No, I mean, now that I think about it, thanks, John. I appreciate that. But no, no, it wasn't anything like that. It was my job. I understood that, you know, and I tell people, like, we were 911, like nobody else was coming, right? And so I knew that that's what I signed up to do. And It's not work in law enforcement any day going, "Hey, you know, I want to shoot somebody today." Heck no. I mean, I tell people it's like, it's a decision that I'll make every day if I have to, but it's something that I hope I never have to do again. But I mean it. If I had to do that same thing every single day, I would. If it meant that I get to go home to my family, or if it meant that I'm saving people. And honestly, you know, I decided to, when I told the corporal I'm going to take this shot, it's because I thought people were bleeding out. Right?
Yeah, you got to end it.
I have to end it. Like, I can't just sit here. We're giving him, I mean, we probably talked to him for, it seemed like forever. It was probably 30 seconds to a minute. That's a long time when you're sitting there with the guy with the gun. And I remember thinking, like, you know, there's people bleeding out, and we have to get to them. We have to get them some help, and we can't until this threat is neutralized. And yeah, it wasn't like a retribution thing. No, it was more of, I have to end this. And you know what? Screw you, dude. Like, you caused this, not me.
Right. Like, how dare you come into this neighborhood and do this to these people?
Yeah. And thankfully nobody else was hit in that other than him. And, you know, I found some things out about the guy, and he was not a good guy, you know, obviously. And he had a few screws loose. And, you know, I'm a huge Second Amendment supporter. I'll fight for gun rights till the day I die. But at the same time, like, that's not the guy I want to have a gun. You know, everybody, you know, ask, "Hey, you know, do you want everybody to have a gun?" Well, no, not necessarily. I want good Americans to have guns, and even people that mess up. I'm not saying that they should lose their gun rights forever, but certain people, no, I don't want you to have a gun.
So, did this guy have a criminal record?
He did. He had a pretty one. He shouldn't have had firearms. I found some stuff out that we weren't able to confirm, but I'll say this, like the guy had a past, and a very violent past, and there were a lot of people that called in that knew him, that told us things about him that just, like crazy stuff.
So you mentioned that you, first of all, I appreciate you doing that.
Yeah.
I want to make that very clear, because that is not something that everybody can handle. I don't think people, even in the gun world, have any idea the mental toll that killing someone could take on you.
Right.
We've seen the amount of veterans just in our lifetime. You and I are very similar in age. So seeing the guys all ship off and come back a completely different, like a shell of who they are, killing can change you.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And, I meant what I said. Like, it's something I hope I never have to do again, but I'm prepared to do it at any moment, because and I'm not tooting my own horn, but that's what good men do, right?
Yeah.
Like, you have to have people like that in society that are willing to put themselves in harm's way to protect others. And,
I totally agree.
Like, I'm not a cop anymore. I medically retired last year. Actually, I finished my career back at Stockton Unified as a sergeant. In 2016, I transferred back, had an opportunity to go back, and I did as a sergeant, and got to help run that department, and put on a lot of active shooter trainings, big scaled active shooter trainings with a lot of different police departments and fire departments and EMS, that I'm very, very proud of, because that was huge. And even though I'm out of law enforcement now, I will continually back law enforcement as a whole, because I understand the dynamic of cops having to make split-second decisions on a daily basis, life or death decisions. They don't have time on their side, and these same decisions they're weighed in a courtroom with a courtroom full of experts that take weeks and months to figure out whether or not that decision was right or wrong. And so,
it's all Monday morning quarterback shit. Like,
no, I hate that. Like, you weren't there. And man, stuff that hits the media, I believe about half of what is told until I really find the details. And believe me, I'm as supportive and defensive as I am for law enforcement. I'm also the guy that's going to scrutinize, because you have to, right? Because you're given so much authority as a police officer. I have the authority. Everybody really has it, but I have the authority to take somebody's life. I don't take that lightly, right? I gear up every day prepared with a firearm and gear to protect myself if I get in a firefight. That's the truth, and so I don't take that lightly. But I also scrutinize law enforcement. There's bad apples in every profession, and unfortunately, people squeeze through the cracks. Sometimes they start out good and they get corrupted, or they make a wrong decision. It doesn't necessarily mean they're a bad person. They just made a wrong decision.
Sure.
Weird things happen too. I'll talk about another incident I was involved in. It was another officer involved shooting back in 2008. I was involved in an OIS with other officers, and I had just transitioned. We were in a standoff with a guy who had a gun pointed to himself, and they had me transition from my patrol shotgun to a less lethal shotgun with sock rounds. I had lethal cut with other officers, and this guy comes running out, points the gun at us, and we lit him up. And I ran up and I kicked the gun out of the guy's hand. And I realized it was an airsoft gun.
Huh.
Tell you why I lost sleep after that. It wasn't the fact that we shot him, and he lived, thankfully, and he's actually doing very well to this day. He was just down and out. But the thing that bothered me for so long was this guy was holding an airsoft gun, and when he pointed it at us, when the gunfire erupted, I saw muzzle flash coming from his pistol. That's an awesome a firearm. And that's what messed me up. And I had to talk to a doctor after that, because I was like, what did I see? I would testify to that to this day. And he said, you're not the first person to tell me that. He said, when you're in that flight or fight situation, he goes, sometimes your brain zooms in on danger and it fills in the gaps for you.
Yeah.
He goes, That's the only thing I can say, is that that's what your brain did. You saw what you saw, you heard what you heard. And yeah, I understand why you're kind of messed up about it, because you understand that that wasn't a real firearm. It was an airsoft gun. And you saw what you saw.
I know a small amount about psychology and all those sorts of things, and the human brain very much fills in the blanks, and that's why eyewitnesses are less and less credible the more we understand about people. You know, the eyewitness accounts of certain events are always all over the map in terms of like, oh, what's the guy look like? What color was his shirt? What did you hear? I mean, prime example was the attempted assassination on Trump. Some of the stories were all over the place.
Yeah. Again, I don't know what to believe, man, because I wasn't there. You know, I have things that I've watched and I go, oh man, there's something up to that, or that's weird, or that. I'm just like everybody else when it comes to that. But yeah, I get it, you know. And
I just want to know how much the CIA paid that kid.
Right.
All right. So I have a hard question for you.
What's up?
And because I know my audience had the same thought. You said a phrase that a lot of Second Amendment absolutists, as we like to be called, would sort of cringe at a little bit. You said, I support the Second Amendment, but, and then you filled in with, I don't want certain people to own guns. And my question is, what do you suggest is the methodology for preventing evil people from getting guns if they have not broken the law? What is, like, when you think of that, what is the path to fixing that in the U.S.?
So let me rewind by saying, yes, I absolutely support the Second Amendment. And I apologize if I said but, because I hear that and I cringe. I said that.
You did. I was like, oh, this will be interesting. Okay. I understand the perspective. Like, I understand that there are people that, you know, we probably don't want to have guns, but legally they are allowed. And I personally am fine with people that I don't really like having guns, because it's everybody's Second Amendment right. Whether they, you know, that's my stance. That's why I want to ask you, like, how do you get there? How do you land on who is okay and who is not okay?
I think it's a case by case scenario, because I've sat here and I've racked my brain for years going, how do we keep maniacs from not being armed? Like, if the guy that I got in the shooting with and killed, let's just say he made it.
Sure.
That's a person who probably wouldn't want to have a gun, right? How do you redeem yourself from that, especially knowing what I know about his background? And I have to be careful on what I share. Sure.
Yeah.
But like, those are the type of people that I'm referring to, right? This kid yesterday in Georgia, I'd cringe, man, growing up. You know, if he grows up and he gets out, do we want this guy having round two now? You know?
So forgive me, I have intentionally not looked at the stuff from Georgia. The kid survived this? He's not dead?
He's in custody.
Oh my gosh.
Apparently, from what I'm hearing, is that he had been on the FBI's radar since 2023.
I saw that.
Infatuation with other active shooters. And so, yeah, when you look at a guy like that, I mean, let me ask you, would you feel comfortable with that guy being armed? Like, you know, if he beats the case for whatever reason, gets out.
First of all, he's fucking 13 years old.
14, yeah.
14. Okay, so he's 14 years old. There are a series of things that went wrong for him to acquire these guns and get them into a school.
Yeah.
I think the thing is, if the FBI, in this particular case, if the FBI was tracking him and was very well aware of it, why the fuck didn't they do something? This is not the first time. This is where I start to get really pissed off at the FBI. They're like, oh, we knew about this kid, and you just fucking sat by and watched him do something horrendous.
Right.
Like, if he's actually on your radar and he's actually a threat, do something.
And
figure it out.
That's what I'm talking about. And that's what I was referring to when I say there are some people out there that I'm not comfortable with. Okay. That's what I'm talking about.
I wanted to give you an opportunity to explain, because I know people are very, like harsh on things like that. And I wanted you, you know, you don't seem like a dickhead, so I wanted to see what you really thought.
No, and I'm the guy that's up testifying in Senate committee hearings with gun owners of California and gun owners of America fighting for. And so, you know, being a proud member of GOA, like there's like the no compromise stance that I'm taking. However, I don't want to say but.
Not twice.
there are certain people that have proven they shouldn't. People ask me, okay, well, the people that have gone to prison, let's just say for a non-violent crime, and they redeem themselves, okay, let's take a look at it. I don't think that they should lose their gun rights forever. Okay. If they pay their society, I think there's a lot of people that have just messed up. Doesn't mean they're a bad person. You asked a very specific question on what do I think needs to happen. I think we, when I say we, decision makers and lawmakers need to protect the Second Amendment, stop attacking it, because you know it says it shall not be infringed. That's pretty powerful. And as a police officer, former cop, when I read a law and it says should versus shall is an absolute thing, right? Not should, not let's think about it. It says shall not be infringed. That word shall is in there on purpose. It's the men who wrote that document in our Constitution, they knew what they were doing and they worded it specifically for a reason.
So when you hear the idea of like a violent criminal getting back out, you know, what is my challenge with this idea is I firmly believe that if a felon is out of prison, out of jail, whatever the F it is, if he's out, then he should be, in theory, good to go. Right. And then we have these issues of relapse. And all I can think is, why'd you let that dude out if he's still a problem? Like, if these people are actually a problem, keep them.
Right.
Right. So where do we, like, how do we go about, you have an intimate knowledge of that sort of thing. What do they call it? Recidivism, right? So how do we deal with that in terms of gun ownership and things like that?
That's hard. It's something that I wish I had it figured out, and I don't. Again, we have to look at each case and really look into what that person has done, who they are, have they really rehabilitated, I don't think there's a blanket answer to any of it. Unfortunately, when things happen, just like with yesterday, and when we have Kamala Harris standing up saying, yeah, this is why we ban firearms, and we need to ban assault weapons, and we need to have red flag laws, and which is so dangerous to me, because I don't want people looking. I've had family members that, badmouth me because I didn't want to hang out with them, because they're off, getting drunk and getting high and living a lifestyle I don't want to be a part of. And all of a sudden now I'm some bad guy, and they're like, oh, he shouldn't, he's the one that shouldn't have guns, and he's the one, it's just, I don't want those red flag laws out there affecting good people. So I don't know. It's hard. It's something I've banged my head against, going, how do we fix this? How do we combat this? I don't know.
I mean, we end up going in a circle at some point, but one of the things I think that's kind of fascinating is that prison, jail has become more of a holding place rather than a rehabilitation place. What's your experience with that in particular?
Especially in California, it's a joke. There is no rehabilitation going on that I know of, that I've seen. In fact, and I cringe because it's like the people that I thought, okay, good, we got him dead to rights, we're sending this guy away, he's out, or she's out.
Yeah.
And like, this person is an absolute threat to society, and they've proven that time and time again. And yet California is slapping these people on the hand, and at the same time they're calling for your rights and my rights to be infringed upon. It's like, well, what are we doing? we can't have our cake and eat it too. When Prop 47 back in 2012 passed here in California,
what is Prop 47?
It's a bunch of weapon charges.
Okay.
From felony to misdemeanor. And so I'm out there dealing as a cop. I'm dealing with these gangsters and these guys that are out, committing acts with these, firearms and other weapons and hurting a bunch of people. And they're getting a slap on the hand. So I go, well, what are we doing? I'll be honest, man. I'm really glad to be out of law enforcement for many reasons, just because it is kind of a joke in many ways.
What are you doing with your life now? You said you're medically retired. What's Rob Young doing now?
So what Rob Young is doing now is I'm in the process of really trying to get my name out there as a public speaker. I love traveling around. I've spoken at several different conferences and been able to tell my story, from start to finish. And I know we only have, an hour or whatever to talk, but there's so much more to my story that I think is inspiring. And I want to use my story to inspire thought. I continue to tell my story every chance I get to inspire thought, really, and to motivate people to preparedness and being ready for when shit hits the fan for them. And I've really dedicated my life to the training realm. I work with several different consulting groups. I work with a company called Knowledge Saves Lives as a training consultant. I teach class shooter response, stop the bleed. We do a lot of other safety trainings for campus-based organizations such as schools and hospitals and businesses, workplace violence type trainings, which I love. And we're a company. We have about 52 consultants up and down the state.
Wow.
Of former law enforcement, EMS guys, military guys that have said, all right, we're not done working. We may be done as a first responder, but now let's take our experiences and really get out there to teach these classes and hopefully, get people's wheels turning, because, again, people have that fight, flight, or freeze, just human reaction to danger. And the last thing I want is for people to freeze. And so that's why we continue telling our stories. We have a consultant that survived the Route 91 shooting. We have a consultant that survived the Boston Marathon bombing.
Oh my gosh.
There's so many stories within our company. I'm also a part owner in a company called Modern Warrior Training Concepts. We really focus kind of on the same type of classes, active shooter response, stop the bleed certifications. But we focus really on a lot of churches and church groups. We hear about these attacks on church campuses and different church shootings. So we really prioritize that within our company, but we'll teach anybody. We do a women's self-defense class in that company. We also do firearms training. So I'm out there teaching. I love dealing with especially new shooters and people that have, maybe have a fear of guns and getting them through that. We've had a lot of success stories come through our classes. That's
great, man. So really what that all boils down to is you're busy as hell.
I'm really busy. I'm working on a book.
Wow.
I got a lot of irons in the fire, and I think people are going to start seeing my name out there a little bit more.
Sure.
I continue doing what I do, not for any spotlight. It's not a spotlight thing for me. It really is to inspire others. And that's what I've dedicated my life to. And I'll continue doing it as long as I can, and honestly, it's the way I heal is being able to, being able to talk about it and not holding it in, and using my experiences to go, all right, this was a horrible thing, but how do I bring some light to it? Right. And so, that's why I keep doing it. Some people say I have to do it.
I appreciate the sort of in-depth look that we were able to get. I know we don't have a shitload of time, but I will say that I don't know that I could have done the exact same thing. I don't know. I mean, I would like the adult version of me says, yeah, of course I could. But I know myself as a kid. I don't know that I would be able to be that resilient. And I really genuinely applaud that. And I'm really excited that you're able to go to events like Goals and tell your story. I'd love to see you out at GunCon next year. That we'll talk about that another time. But
let me know, man. I'll be there. Anything I could do for you and your channel and your
sure.
brand, man. We're connected now. So
hell yeah, brother. Well, is there like one website where people can find out about what you're doing?
Yeah, so I'm on Linktree. If you look up on Linktree, Rob James Young, you can find me on Facebook at Rob James Young Official.
Okay.
Instagram, Rob James Young. I'm on, let's see, I got a list here. Hold on. I'm on
you got the whole thing.
Rob James Young 82 and on Trigger Hill as Rob James Young as well. And people say, what's up with the James? I said, well, there's a lot of Rob Youngs out there.
Yeah.
And I'm actually related to Jesse James, the outlaw. That's what I'm named after. I have neat. If I can show you, and I was in Scottsdale with Travis Haley from Haley Strategics, and he's like, dude, you have to use that. You have to capitalize on that. And so I use that for my social media stuff.
Sure.
And and I'm in the process of building a website. I'll send you all that information.
Yeah. That'd be great, man.
Anything I can do for you, your channels, let me know.
I appreciate that. I really do. And I appreciate you sharing the story. I do want to see you continue telling that story because I think it's very important. I think people need to hear that it is possible to survive and have a sort of self-empowered perspective on life. And I think that's very important. Guys, if you are out there listening, watching, check out Camerado, camerado.com, camerado.com/TGC. Use the code TGC. Get yourself a discount on some sweet camo. Sean made it. Sean's one of my closest friends. I love it. There's a whole bunch of different colors. You'll be able to find something that fits your area, your style, etc. There's t-shirts, there's hoodies, there's pants for some reason. There's a hockey jersey, I think, in there too. And you can get our Sea Smoke pattern, which is very much like oceanic. It's blue. It's awesome. Go do that, camerado.com. Thank you, Rob. I appreciate you being here, brother. And as always, guys, thank you all for watching. We'll see you soon.